our favorite Shabbat of the year. Shabbat when we welcome back to our synagogue something like 55 of the elite members of the Israel National Defense College. They are Israel's best. The best women and men in Israel's national security apparatus, representing the military, the police force, the intelligence services, and also members of the diplomatic corps. Foreign militaries send some of their best to the INDC to spend a year with their Israeli counterparts, and some of them are here with us as well. Our guests are the ones who, either now or a few years from now, will be the senior commanders of Israel's defense establishment and leaders in its foreign service. They were handpicked to participate in this intense year-long study program. Away from their field commands, they have the time and the space to think and to learn about anything and everything that may impact on their future leadership, including understanding America and our Jewish community better, which is what brings them to us this Shabbat. Welcome to you and to your commanding officer, Major General Itai Veruv. Good to see you again. Why don't you take a moment and turn and just either say Shabbat Shalom or wave. They're easy to find. They're the ones in uniform. They understand Hebrew, even your Hebrew, English as well. I'm also delighted to welcome back my friend, Ambassador Israel Nitzan. Ambassador Nitzan, where are you? There you are. Okay. The Deputy Consul General of Israel in New York and his staff who are accompanying the INDC delegation. Bruchim habayim. Welcome, honored guests. You're among family here. You have come to a synagogue that was founded by the 20th century preeminent American Zionist leader, Rabbi Stephen Wise, and a century later, we faithfully represent and dutifully carry on his legacy. We are not neutral on Judaism. We are not neutral on Israel. Neutrality is not our job. We are passionate partisans. We will always stand by Israel's side no matter what. We will never abandon Israel or give aid and comfort to Israel's enemies. We are tied unconditionally to the destiny of the Jewish people everywhere and to the fate of the Jewish state in the land of Israel. No matter the grievance, we will never justify, whitewash, or excuse terror, and we will always support Israel's right and moral obligation to defend itself against any attacks. We're not uncritical. An uncritical Jew is a contradiction in terms. There never was, and there never will be such a strange creature. The members of our congregation differ on the day-to-day policies of the Israeli government. But then again, they also differ on the day-to-day policies of the American government. And truth be told, they differ on the daily decisions of the synagogue as well. If I do not receive criticism after some public statement or remark that I made, I feel disappointed, as if I didn't fully express myself. That's who we are. We are a highly contentious people. We like ourselves this way. We enjoy debate, It gives spice to life. Like everyone else, Jews also make mistakes. That's what I hear anyway. And when we are mistaken, when we overstep, when we are just simply wrong, not only is it fair, legitimate, and proper to criticize us, even harshly, it's welcome and necessary. Criticism and rebuke make us better and are integral to Jewish identity. Hocheach tochiach et amitecha, the Torah states. Rebuke your fellow. And the word rebuke is repeated twice, according to the sages, hocheach tochiach, to emphasize that if your fellow is not moved by the first rebuke, do it again and again. But while we welcome reproach, even if it is not easy to hear, we are also acutely aware that some people hate Jews. And if anything, Jew hatred is on the rise in the Western world. Anti-Semitism has existed long before as long as the Jewish people existed, long before the State of Israel was created. In fact, it was the central catalyst for the rise of the late 19th century Zionist movement in the first place. According to our tradition, the moment God came from Sinai in Hebrew, sin'ah, hatred of Jews entered the world. Jewish sages believed that Sinai and sin'ah, Jews and hatred of Jews, came into the world together. Earlier this week, I interviewed Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, for my upcoming podcast. I hope all of you listen to this interview. We'll drop it in about 2 weeks. Jonathan described the truly frightening rise in anti-Semitic incidences in this country. Jew hatred and animosities never before witnessed in our lifetimes are sweeping upon us from both the right and the left of the ideological and political spectrum. As Jonathan explained with great passion and eloquence, the anti-Semitism of the right is a kind of hurricane or tornado. It bears down on you quickly and with great ferocity and will destroy everything in its path, even the shelter where you are seeking to ride out the storm. The anti-Semitism of the left is akin to climate change, slow and gradual, often unnoticed and unattended, but steadily raising the temperature of Jew hatred and normalizing it, thus poisoning the atmosphere of freedom and tolerance. The Jew hatred of the left focuses not on Jews per se, but on the Jewish state. It employs the same tried and true anti-Semitic tropes that Israel was born in original sin, that Zionism is a racist ideology, that Israel is a colonial enterprise, a white supremacist entity whose intent is to subjugate and persecute an indigenous minority, seeks to boycott Israel. As Jews were often boycotted by anti-Semites even before the Zionist movement was even conceived. They accuse Israel of all of the worst sins against liberalism that can be imagined. Ethnic cleansing, apartheid, even harvesting organs of Palestinians. So much of this is factually wrong, ignorant, and just simply ridiculous that even to refute these accusations is to give them unwarranted credence. Suffice it to say that most Jews of the world and of Israel are not white or of European descent. Zionism's intent and success was to save Jews persecuted in Europe and by Arab and Muslim countries in the Middle East. And Jews are the most indigenous population of all in the land of Israel. But when do facts get in the way of Jew hatred? Show me when it has happened in all of human history. Jews do something that no other people do. We managed to unite the extreme right and the extreme left. They are on opposite sides of the political and religious spectrum on practically everything else, but fold into each other at the extremes, overlapping on their agreement of their hatred of Jews. One calls it Jews will not replace us. The other calls it Israel will not replace us. We are aware that some American Jews are anti-Zionists. For our Israeli guests, know that while they get a lot of attention, they are still the small minority of American Jewry. Anti-Zionism is a luxury of Jews who live in the West. As our congregants know, 23 of our members recently traveled to Poland and to the Ukrainian border to bear witness to the unfolding tragedy, to bring relief to Ukrainian refugees, and to express solidarity with the Ukrainian people. There are no Jewish anti-Zionists in the whole of Ukrainian Jewry. Not one. The Jewish Agency is flooded with daily requests from Ukrainian Jews and Russian Jews as well to get to Israel. We met them in Warsaw. Anti-Zionism is a luxury of those contently ensconced in air-conditioned lecture halls and comfortable quads, who cannot conceive of what it means to be persecuted, despised, and hunted for being Jewish. But for Jews in trouble, for oppressed Jews, for Jewish refugees, they all know that there is one place in the world that will take them, one place in the world that wants them, one place they will be welcomed and embraced. And given the tragic, blood-soaked history of our people, if that is all that Zionism accomplished, dayenu, that alone would have been enough. And even legitimate criticism of Israel, criticism whose intent is constructive, is often tainted with a kind of intellectual elitism built on the scaffolding of real-world naivete, of not having to contend with actual responsibilities. Where you sit often determines where you stand. If you're sitting at the editorial desk of the Harvard Crimson student newspaper, your view of the world is different than if you're sitting in Sderot, bordering Hamas, or Kiryat Shmone, near Hezbollah, or even in Tel Aviv. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Cambridge, England, the 100,000 missiles pointed at Israel by Hezbollah or the nuclear ambitions of Iran are not quite as pressing for you as for those living in Israel. And so the context from which your views emerge is often distorted. You're not there. You are not living the local reality. Often, you don't even know the basic facts or the basic history. You're often simply parroting tweets or slogans so you can be considered on the right side of virtue. But our guests here today they have actual responsibilities, heavy responsibilities, for the defense of the state of Israel. It doesn't mean that Israeli politicians and military leaders are always right, but it also doesn't mean that their critics are always right simply by virtue of employing virtuous-sounding social justice rhetoric. This week's Torah portion, Beha'alotcha, describes the link between freedom and responsibility. You remember Moses had liberated the people from 400 years of slavery. They're free. They're taken care of. All their needs in the wilderness are provided for. There's shelter, protection, water, food, and still, at the very first moment of freedom, the Israelites air their grievances to Moses in a way that only Jews could really appreciate. We don't like this food, they say. It's horrible and bland. There's no meat to eat, they whine. We remember the fish we ate for free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. Really? Can't you be grateful for, oh, I don't know, freedom? You're complaining now about the food? And comparing the food you're eating in the wilderness to Egyptian cuisine, the food of affliction? You missed that? And did you really eat all that fine food in Egypt? Really? Fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic, all superfoods according to modern-day nutritionists. Really? Pharaoh gave you superfoods to eat? What, because he was worried about your cholesterol? The sages picked up on this astonishing verse in the Parsha. Zacharnu et hadaga asher nochal b'Mitzrayim chinam. Et hakishuim ve'et ha'avatichim ve'et hechatzir ve'et habetzalim ve'et hashumim. We remember the fish, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic we ate for free in Egypt. Commentators focused on that one Hebrew word, chinam, free. It didn't need to be in the text. It seems gratuitous. The verse could have simply read, we remember all the food we ate in Egypt that we don't eat now. Why add that short Hebrew word, chinam? Rashi responds, their food in Egypt was free of mitzvot, free of obligation. Freedom means responsibility. But the Jews of Egypt expected to receive everything without Jewish responsibility. Once they received the commandments at Mount Sinai, the mountain of Jewish responsibility, they complained. Not so much about the food. If it was about the food, the word free wouldn't have been in the Torah. They complained about paying for the food with the wages of Jewish responsibilities. They were complaining that it wasn't chinam. It wasn't free. They wanted free Judaism. They wanted free freedom. They didn't want to contend with all the problems, dilemmas, tensions of liberty. Israel has restored the freedom, the collective dignity, the respect and self-respect, the well-being of the Jewish people. And none of this is free. To acquire and maintain freedom requires sacrifice, and hard choices by people who actually have heavy responsibilities and who must respond to the real threats of the real world, the world as it is, not the world as we would want it to be. Whereas for the previous 2,000 years of wandering, our people were powerless, Zionism, in restoring collective Jewish power, has created all of our modern-day dilemmas of exercising power justly. But Jewish history proves decisively that it is far better for Jews to have power and to struggle with its moral use than to be powerless and subject to the whims of the dark lords. Our guests tonight represent those who are on the front lines of Jewish self-determination. They protect all of us, including those who may be among their harshest critics. As our honored guests, we say to you what Moses said to Joshua. Chazak ve'ematz, v'Adonai hu ha'olech lefanecha. Be strong and of good courage. Fear not and do not falter, and may the eternal God be with you. Amen.
ערב של שושנים נצאנה אל הבוסתן מור בשמים ולבונה ורגלך נפתח לילה יורד לאט ורוח שושן נושבה אבא אל השלח שיר בנה זמר של אהבה שנים אצאנה אל הבוסתן מור בשמים ולבונה לרגלך מפתן לילה יורד לאט ורוח שושן נושבה אבא אל השלח שיר בנה זמר של אהבה
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.